Oh yeah, now. Yes, I am going to recite the Parijaparvita Sutra's mantra. Tayata gade gade para samgade buddhi sa. Tayata gade gade para samgade buddhi sa. Tayata gade gade para samgade buddhi sa. Yeah. The Sanskrit, the tenshi, that debashi sunguyari, mazu tenji nimbusa ngadish, shilabinda.
So,
another mantra I will say, which is the essence of the dependent origination mantra, which teaches the Four Noble Truths.
Omo yedama hidu tamba hidu tegen tatanga to yawanda tegen zayo neruda yawambote ma shamana yeso omo yedama hidu tamba hidu tegen tatanga to yawanda tegen zayo neruda yawambote ma shamana yeso ha 관계 주제는 나와서 좀 외제로 담배 신의 던져 고담 달라 창생로 Now, today, the explanation about Shantadeva's book, Bodhisattva Traya Avatara, 10 chapters. Now 6th chapter and 8th chapter. I choose these two chapters because this is this 6th chapter dealing with anger, hatred. See, the anger is the greatest obstacle to develop infinite altruism. So, the 6th chapter, I felt is something useful. And then 8th chapter, explaining the usefulness about altruism. So that's the main practice. Actually, Buddhicitta is the infinite altruism with combination of wisdom. So that's something, I think, the essence of Buddha's teaching. And all these great Nalanda masters, they practice also the Buddhicitta. So, and then the text which yesterday, the Nagarjuna's text, you see that? You see, mainly explain about wisdom side. Of course, at the beginning, the virtues were non-virtues and virtues. That's the real sort of causes to achieve human life. And then mainly they about Shunya. So those now, you see, this morning I'm going to explain essence, the 6th chapter. Now I would like to explain something, the connection, altruism and theory of shunyata. Now, in Tibetan now. Changshu Jisem Siddhadi 지금이 자와디 닝지를 아니 가서를 그게 동네에 차나 사바시 자와 줄지 삼바로 된데기다 wishful thinking 서지 된데기 닝지직 열다 된 안저의 넘지다 용기 열어라 냐랑 자주보조에 닝지디 냠시 능기야래 그는 세미시 냠시 패진 능기야래 다 안다급데 닝지 거리지랬을나 동네에 자원데 봐 사고다 가라 잘라 젤사디 동네에 차나 파라다 찰때 매매체 동네에 자원을 차 삼았던데겠다 학습 리뉴기 닝지 닝도 이해하시겠다 동네에 자와지 저기 인생이 된지기 비게다 간다 가서 우리 심슈 제용에서 차대기 하래 자 된지기다 대의 명신 좀더 닝지스 자 된지르다 동네에 자와를 차 세대 된지기다 닝지 로께 발라 아니 동네 아니 제루이 버지 냐를 시작하고 동네 제루이 버마시나 근데 동네에 자와를 차 쓰는다 산재가 송기 다 동네에 자와를 차 동네에 자와를 쇼치 사로 들으시려나 아니 그 때문에 누가 시락 누밖에 못 봐. 다 동네 제퇴야지. 동네 세퇴야지. 그냥 쉬어라. 다 동네 세퇴야 쉬어라. 가서라는 신기. 아니 동네기 주 아니 군중사용 거야래. 군중 조차야 돼. 녀모래. 녀모게 조 녀모 독숨래. 녀모 독숨함. 녀모 통나. 이래서 용기야래. 다 뒤자자데 아니 timu bare timu le rimba mangu yebanane ta timu tenzin de sorisha 자 dire indu anda gobulu du de sungdo wa tongni den jube na le ya gyodan kyen le kyen nam yangda ba ne to wa kang den denbe mori song tele yala junin jungs 전에 땡데 양라 주니 당부 머리 버디 gyodan kyen de den jun ngobonam yangda ba 예버다도 낭 양다고 주어다도 낭 나도 셴베 로데 아니 통에 머리 버들이스 대래에는 누지로 써봐 아니 땡들 하모디도 용기하듯이 진짜 문제 나도가 강사 라제트베 제스 주버즈베 즈버 대섬지 뭐임바 딱 간다 천은 런시 주버즈베 즈버테 딱 머리 버리야 문제 나도가 단 도이 롱다 망고야래 저다 가다 리베잖아 즉 셰트야지 레샤 또 베잖아 송셰베 김젠디리 삼루스타 아니 소스 즉 냠뇽레도 즉 제인 삼루스타 바이나 베나 떡시랑 다야 말에 삼네 잡아 이나야 아니 풍부 셈네 저도 마 사지 로르 샤데야 될라 풍불의 tension에 다 매버 그저 삼다네 된저기 다음에 떡배 싫어되기 떡이랑 다 매버는 게 싫어되기 뇌속으로 하면도가 풍불로 아태든 ዝበ어든 되면도가 다 섬삼배 체질하면 송거야래 아니 강사 강도다고 시 풍속의 최대에 다 다음에 봤어야지 송거야래 다 될라 냐라 이네 소소 치든 디간 치든 아니 나온다도 주요 말이스 치르도 주요 말이스 아니 치르기 최 그게 증행이 셰베 땡이야 아니 박자 지금 그게다 전적이 그게다 나온 담에 샤야게 박자 셋업기 아니 치르고 나온데 샤워레스 서 박자 셋업기 나온 인도잖아요 아니 런진 셰바다 디 치르 돈도 예바지 나온데게디 아니 하 상담이나 자주 셰베이나 아니 자식레스 자장은 알아서 지금 차단께서 속도로 속도를 제디 팔문의 예바로 신는 거 열대 야마리스 디디 런진 셰베 땡네 박자세도 잠래 신다 지든 간 지든 매바 네번이야지 도가 근데기다 송진이동 그때 권한이 떠네 그제 공부 있나야 디 랑그 생기 뇨 디도기 뇨 아테그 집어때 용한테라 내하면도가 자 진짜 인도산에 다 섬섬에 송진이동 그 돈이 즉 삼다는 공부 있네 디나 생기 디도기 뇨나 아테그 집어때라 내야 면도가 다한테는 우마베 나라 아니 저담제 치송어다 나즈버 간다베 창물로 아니 담벌 못 주거래 세네 다제 단동 고아디 아니 론네멜라 나외 왕기 예버 모임바 아니 유랑 그 투모 모임이 둘루중문에 주버 진짜지 각서를 샤네 진짜지 요 말이 세네 배 타체네 타체버지기 로로베 고아로 실레베 이네 낭섬실 하되기도 와 전쟁원의 예버정 나영도 와 능주 최식 전쟁원의 여러보다 알아 단 능주 편에 전쟁원의 예버지 나영고 여러 된데기 능주 최식 예버체 단대 아니 대한 담벌다 주임에 봐 제인도산에 아니 니주메다 인도산에 대한 담벌 모니기 뭐 줬신 다 송샤 디갈릭도 단 되게 안답게 믹들 하되기도 와 자, 다들이 인도산에 아니 좀 된데 너나라 아니 쑥 동보니 쑥수 송셔버는 송셔버다. 당연히 니친나 측지하래. 다게 측심시 죽으면 단다데 나가랬다. 쑥 동보니 기 동을 미시티 쑥니 동보니 당스잖아. 간다 덴지 계세 미게디 시구야라. 그다 그게 타녀도 아니 전쟁원에 이게바지 샤바이나 간다 미디디 식통도 와. 자, 근데 이 인도 또 루루다 yap세겠다. 가서 공부에 투모인 봐. 아니 타녀도야 모니 줘요 말에 신의 송샤다 대상으로 거윤데 아니 땀 민도 삼바지 내가 딱 되잖아. 민도 삼바지 내가 슉슉 쉬우실 때 해야지. 뜻도 와. 다데 내가 찍디 다음에 rakpa ngama 다음에 rakpa ngama 그래 나 틱틱 남의 라고 nga마 그게 다 체명에서 로토로 체명에니 딘지 디 제법 만년배 링라 남의 침에 땅다 그다 담벌 짐베디 게토도 그 사실이지 다 남의 차로 침배 남의 침에 던 네니 디 제법 많이 배는라 덴지 라고 이렇게 하게 시골입니다. 타녀도야 아니 원이 유튜브 캐기르잖아요. 단 밑에 거라 싸우는 15인데 어다 지금 10대 누르는 서로 영화를 지금 아대게 접어지야 서로 지금 풍불 아대게 접어지야 서로 디 다 딘디 인도 다 차라다 서류 캬바디 다 도선 삼다 베자나네 송요래 소소도 삼다 즉 잡아잡아이나 디 캬바시도 자 다디 시작해야 되더리 아니야 디스큐트
connection between altruism and shunyata. First, we're talking about an altruism in terms of the bodhicitta, and then it is said the root of bodhicitta is compassion, and within compassion, which there are two types. One, which is almost like a wishful thinking, where you wish others to be free from suffering, or you may think, may they be free from, how nice if they could be free from suffering, others could be free from suffering, and so forth, which even the practitioners of the Shravakayana, Pratyeka Buddhayana also could cultivate and have the experience of. But the kind of compassion that we are talking about here is this: not only the wish for others to be out of suffering, not remaining only there, but even going further to say, may I be able to free them from suffering. There is this sense of wanting to save others from the suffering, alleviate others' suffering. And for this kind of a sense of taking responsibility to happen, one must actually know that there is a possibility of freedom from suffering completely, without which you may have the wish to help others, but you cannot do much. And so there's nothing that you will find that you can do. And therefore, one needs to think about the suffering being rooted in what we call the three poisons of attachment, hatred, and ignorance. Or we also sometimes refer to the five poisons. With jealousy, pride, and added. And then of these different destructive emotions, the afflictive emotions, the root of them is ignorance. And therefore, ignorance here, as we already dealt with yesterday, which is the ignorance about the true reality of how things actually are. And therefore, in one of the sutras, it says that whatever has arisen from Master Nagarjuna has said that in his 70 verses that whatever arises through condition do not exist in reality, do not have any real existence. In other words, independent existence. But because of this clinging to this kind of real existence of things, and then we create karma, and therefore he says that therefore we create the rest of the 12 links of dependent origination. And so the ignorance about the true reality of things is the root, the first of the link, and then that leads to the creation of karma, and which in turn propels the rest of the chain of the 12 links of dependent origination. So here, this ignorance is the ignorance which holds on to things having some kind of inherent existence. And this is the root of samsara. Whereas now, sometimes you may, with regard to this clinging to some kind of self and existence of a person, there is this idea of a person being devoid of any substantially self-sufficient existence of a person, or you may also think about have this idea or the insight into a person being devoid of some kind of a permanent, unitary, autonomous existence. And that however much you may meditate on these kind of selflessnesses, it will not still undermine the deeper clinging to selfhood, self of a person, which is to say that the things, self or a person being existent, inherently, that cannot be undermined. Although you may also think that there is no separate self from the aggregates, and however much you may meditate on that, that will in turn, that too will not undermine this clinging to or damage, or clinging to the person, or the aggregates being devoid of any inherent or self-existent, and so. Um, of course, we have all these different understanding of selflessness. Selflessness in the sense of there being no substantially self-sufficiently existent I or a self, or in the case of the Chittamatra view, that saying that although things do have some seem to have some external existence, they do not actually have external existence as such. They do not have any existence externally, but what happens is that the subjective mind that sees the things and the phenomena, and the subjective mind and the phenomena that it sees are of this. They come from the same seed, and therefore they are of the same substance, and therefore with this kind of view, it will help to see that there is no external. It may help to see that there is no external phenomena, because everything is just a manifestation of the seed, of which also gives rise to the perception of the things. But then it cannot still do away with the clinging to the true existence of the mind also. And so, and although you may be able to do away with the clinging to external things with this kind of Chittamatra view, but then it will not do away with the clinging to the subjective mind as having some kind of true existence. And then also in the case of Madhyamakas, you may have some understanding of the Savatantrika Madhyamaka tradition, where they say that to be existent means that there must be something objectively existent, plus a valid cognition also designates it, and so together something is given an identity of having some existence. And even here, it may help to do away with some degree of clinging to some true existence and things, but then it still holds on to, with this view, they still hold on to some objective existence and things. And therefore, what we need is to destroy all objectification of anything that is called the external world as well as internal world of experiences. And therefore, in the Heart Sutra, we find the mention of form is empty, emptiness is form, and also in another sutra, maybe the 25,000 verses of Paramita Sutra, it says that emptiness does not nullify form, but form itself is empty. And so, in following these, then we understand that we need to destroy all objectification of anything external or internal experience. And therefore, Master Nagarjuna's following the Master Nagarjuna's system, which his system of Master Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Aryadeva and their followers, where we need to develop this understanding and insight that there's nothing whatsoever, even in conventional terms, that called any existence by way of objective existence. And so, when you gain this understanding and an insight, and you gain some kind of experience or feeling for this, that there's nothing objectively existing, then it really reduces your clinging to things having any kind of self-existence. And otherwise, you may have the idea or the understanding of the other forms of selflessness, interpretations, understanding of selflessness, such as selflessness in terms of there being no permanence, unitary and or single and autonomous self, or selflessness in terms of there being no self-sufficiently, substantially existent I, and then this Chittamatra view and so forth. But it will not; these will not do away with the former ones, will not do away with the latter, which are more subtler, they're called the exist or clinging to self in certain things, and therefore we need to do away with the clinging to any kind of objectification of self and other things. And therefore, when you really have this understanding and insight into the very ultimate understanding of selflessness, then that can actually do away with the clinging to self in terms of permanent, single, autonomous self, or self-sufficiently or substantially existent self, or the consciousness has some kind of a true existence, although there is no clinging to the consciousness having some true existence, although there is no external phenomena, or the self having some kind of objective existence, self and other phenomena having some kind of objective existence, although they lack, still while holding on to the thing that they have some true objective existence. And these will be done away with when you have the the understanding that nothing objectively exists at all. And so this will not just, you will not be remaining just at some kind of a superficial intellectual knowledge of, that you find in the text saying that, that there is no true existence, there is no objective existence, and so forth, but you will really feel for yourself that there's nothing that exists truly, objectively, and so forth. That you can actually have the experience of this. So in other words, the understanding of selflessness in terms of self, there being no permanent, single and autonomous self, and the rest of the things. The former ones are grosser, and the latter ones are subtler. So the gaining and understanding and insight into the grosser ones will not do away with the clinging to self from the point of view of the latter selflessness and so forth. But when you gain the subtlest understanding of selflessness, then you will be able to do away with the clinging to self of a permanent, single, and autonomous, and so forth.
आत्म की बात है, तो उसको सबसे पहले स्थूल धर्म निरात्म और स्थूल पुद्गल निरात्म है, इसको समझने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए। सबसे पहले जो हमारा जो पुद्गल निरात्म है, उसकी पूर्व की जो अवस्था है, और फिर उसके बाद धीरे धीरे उसकी सूक्ष्म अवस्था होती चली जाती है। उसको किस तरह की अवस्था होती है, उसे समझने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए। इसके साथ साथ ही पुद्गल निरात्म के बाद जो धर्म निरात्म की जो वास्तविकता है कि किस प्रकार से इसे शून्य कहा गया, अस्तित्व तो नहीं ऐसा कहा गया है, उसको समझने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए। तो सिद्धांत, जहाँ तक इनकी सिद्धांतों की बात की जाए तो सिद्धांत काफ़ी गौड़ हैं, तो काफ़ी गंभीर हैं, तो उनकी गंभीरता को समझें, फिर उसकी जो सूक्ष्मता है, उसकी गहराई है, उनको जानने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए, उनके क्रमबद्ध समझने का प्रयास करना चाहिए। किसी भी सिद्धांत को उसकी जब तक उसकी गौड़ या स्थूल अवस्था क्या है, जो उसकी स्थूल अवस्था क्या है, बिना उसको समझे हम उसकी गौड़ अवस्था अर्थात सूक्ष्म अवस्था को नहीं जान सकते हैं। इसलिए किसी भी सिद्धांत या किसी भी चीज़ की सत्यता को समझने के लिए उसके क्रम को समझना जरूरी है।
ताजरे इंदुसाने ती उमशिब्जेबे नालिया आर्यन देवे एने लुवा जि신도 तिमु군을 내줄 때 디진요모 탐지게 तिमु 좀be 점버교로스잖아요. 그냥 다 앞에 르르 다 르지지 미고원보다 나원보다서 어디들라 르왕게 겹대야레스 앞에 디벨 거니 아니 다 미고원보디 나원보다 겹야 말에 소소소세 다 얘네 르지 원보 르완데 르지 원보 사모라를 겹대야레스 아치 앞에 디 거네 가서 그리고 디무군을 내줘 돼스. 아니 디무디 너무 탐자를 그렇게 켜대요. 다들 켜로대야 양 십자직 상담과 그래서 전혀 강사 라디오 TV 자유지 진배 장배 자유도 주버 진배 장배 아니 착소 너무 rak바시도 와 디디 디무든진도 충전스럽는 도서 마대가 소리지 다디 쉽게배 제반 나가자고 한다 제시버지 나온다 세고 싶지도 와 가서 디무도 탐매대번 주고 주지 디무를 땜바에 가서다 중대에 있으니 니송도 와 저장가 디무를 땜바서야지 된대기다 당진 락배 장배 착소 락바티 디무를 땜바티 디무를 떼는 중어레스 다 디무 원도 손에 디무 된지 원도 손에 다 디무를 탐매대번 주고 주셔야지 차단 참문도 시기도 와 차단 참문데 아니 된진다 총된도 야레스 송도 강다야 묘목 끈을 펴게다 디목 켜도 야레스 근데 인도산에 디진 묘목 탐정이 디목 좀 잡아줘스 배는 참만 남자나라 참소 몽다 개면실 시도 예바 사주 민선에 참바고 봐도 닝지고 봐도 저대디 아니 된진 진단라 누구면도 봐 더동 안 하죠 패발을 지기 닝지 숙성부 기하도 대바 숙성부 기하도 제가 직선은 가시알다 된진 그 좋아지야 용시를 자 간다 지 참소 이 뒷무 몽보다 진단 겨 말이 드리 이번 인도산에 누구 말이 신송도와 저자와다 지 다면 저장도 남들이 슝다 아도 내한테 쉬야가도 우메슝 카가 면자와도 여르디 는 리베 드드 지버리 드리 이번 인도산에 다 뒷무 다 요무 삼재의 벽에 싸워 지기가 인도산에 딘지 뒷무 때 컨데스 배워 소리스랍나 댄진 저번 중앙가 통나 뒷문 중민교로스 동리 돈은 뒷문 남의 돈은 뒷문이고 말씀 못 송체 댄진 저번 중앙강 다디 쉬우서도 와 동반이 그 되는데 댄중기 동반이 있어야지다 댄의 중앙 주전도 체리 원이 주변 동아리스도 말도 다들 저는 이해 매버리 이니 요 말사디 매매체 다들 저는 이해 매버 되기 댄에 딱 봐 마도 로스 매버지기 외면도 쭉 댄에 딱 봐 인데 때문에 라왕기 주버디 매버지 시용도 다들 안 로리야 난게 영이 있는다 치지 나와 수저로서 나와 있는다 간다 때네 샤바지 로를 미쳐라 그 tän게 ngene yebaji che kada kaine didn't senen zumu zuksachi yebaji rola 나용 것도 나왔다도 셴이 대내 취미식 남도고 줬다체 차단 기고로 그래서 인도산에 땡지를 좋아 사다디 땡중 그 태권한 있어야 돼 말이 진짜 인도 땡지를 좋아가 통는 때문 종민교로스 대신 배박 군진들 땀도 통을 녀버려 차 송도와 어디 들으셔 사들이 인도산에 다 디가 한다 다 대대비권에 묘몽스야인데 뽕투야 입었지 싸워디 묘몽 띠물 땡야 그랬어 띠물 땡진데 아니 뭐 정신을 다 매댕에 찍을 치즈로 또 하대 별로치레스 근데 인디안 참한 남자나 송원은 신 tenni tendu wamindi gyula gekso sishiro si songshaadi. Da deyanda tarba chuwa kuduredi, da kanda chigi debyu chu kanchi jimba inaya, di tendu negi yodame, di gyun tendu negi yodame sayandi, di gyula da neji yeme kaan ruwarda. Di gyula neba tamde yeba ina, di debu ko eni tendu wa chagi yamari. Gyudin kaa sona, gyul nyambutamde yebe chane gyudi mesona 대왕의 주변 저부터 매버쳐 그래서 서 다제한테 녀몽수 자연데 차단을 써버 녀모디 이거 싸워 디무텐지 디무텐질 냐부담된도가 디무텐지 기 주버리스 스거래 나와도 주야를 스거래 땡주고 대kho는 이게 나와도 주야 말에 민대 샥삼실이 세샤인도 전에 딱답해 미국 찍으면은 진당 완전히 쉬고도 차는 거야. 자, 드리 인도산에 아주 치 빼나 지기 장례다 차리 차샤나 코 견다 열어 봐. 견다 열어 인도산에 장례 너버트 처리 신부이나 차리만 용도야. 차리게 너버트 처리 신나 장례 용도야. 그 균기 현실도 더 못해야지 자도와. 자, 나 셰발라 숙제 민두산에 딘데기다 숙제는 신기 게다지야 야마데 그 진단 개외되네. 아니 그 로론 개와도가. 다 덴진다 담에도 왜 싫으니 진단 개와 임버 찍을라 담에도 왜 싫으니 진단 그 다음에 봤디 삼다나 빼다 라트야 예대봐. 라트야 예배 이르산에 예바식 철철 줘야 돼 지금. 다 덴지 쇼쇼부샤요 돼. 거 봐봐 싸운다나? 그렇게 딱 가르쳐서 사면서지 차대하지도 와. 그래서 디네 인도산에 로 찍슈라 잡된 참아요 봐. 로 찍슈라 잡된 참아요 봐 인도산에 딱 간다 로 니부딘 진단 개회차네 님도로 로트야 봐. 디도라 찍을 잡된 참아요 봐. 찍을 잡된 참아요 인도산에 엔디 간다 가서 그래. 그 줄을 못 담대요 하래스. 줄을 계속 시시로서 속자 걸때 그래. 되는 땐도 와면 줄을 계속 시시로서 속자 걸때도. 속자 걸때 그래. 가. 그래서 그 가셔 계시는데 샤스케면도 디페지 디인서래. 뜸들 타버 주고 여기 이르잖아요. 녀몬디 심지 정신을 슈매 받잖아요. 심정신 왜서 그 녀몬리아 녀부담된 여바 정도 마세. 녀몬디 심지 정신을 슈요 말이스. 또 속죄 뒤뒤이나 따라식도. 규라메 주물로물 완이다. 연대 정신 이든 실사 전 송샤지. 사실은 인도 디면로 섬기. 다음에 더 고주신다 얘기를 드르스 넘는 로트하면로 sometimes. 사실은 인도 단 타버 주야다. 독선 타버 주고도 동네 세트 그래 사지. 단 동네 세뉴스 통일도 전에 랑델을 저도 타버 톰되고 로트레고. 셴델을 저도 전에 다 셴남자 아니 양대가 사람 거트버 중에 찜으로 사바시로 샤잉으로 동네 타전인 버지 통일도 전에 동네 들레 젠드글로 리그러 동네 타전인 버 마토나 다 동네데 메로잖아 삼베 다진 대바점을 해봐도 그게 문제가 다 동네 들라 동네 지식이 둘라 녀부담대 여바 된데기 고아실래 이르잖아 딱 간다 다 동네 레베 제토야는 도 진짜 인도 다 동네에 차 사바시 로리아 레야지도 와. 저 디디 인도산에 다 질 탈바더니 다 양고 라면 조장 그 청주 더니 다 로디레무도. 청주 모처 청주 토론이 버시. 랑게 규딩은 조롱이 버시. 난게 태도 왜 심지어 탐자로 감듯이 인구세네. 청주 토론이 버지 로리 샤이르잖아요. 다 진짜로다 sem그 정신을 몽바만 간다다 미시베 관계 이니 동네기 상황도 취대받아라 다 동네에 자월차 사바시로 레야지 닝지로 딱 원야탄에 세매 장배 서울에다 근데 닝지로 레야지 용서를 봐. 그래서 근데 인도 동네가 따와대 쉬우지 개셔버려셔. 다 뒤질러. 왜 죽죽소를 해. 다 들려한다. 장죽성 고미하게 참조를 해.
तो जैसा कि माध्यम चतुर्थ शतक में भी कहा गया है कि हमारे जो शरीर आलय है जो हमारे 5 प्रकार के आलय बताए गए हैं.
So in the 400 verses, to follow up on the previous teaching, in the 400 verses of Master Aryadeva, he says that just as the physical faculty permeates all the other sense faculties, likewise ignorance or also permeates all the other negative emotions or afflictive emotions. And therefore he says, because of that, so this is like giving the analogy to the ignorance, and then that ignorance permeates all other negative emotions. And then he says, therefore, when you end or when you destroy the ignorance, then all the rest of the negative emotions will also be destroyed. And so, so with regard to this, now when we talk about the selflessness, of course, we can have the understanding of selflessness in terms of lack or lack of self-sufficiently, substantially existent self, but that may be triggered by the deeper called clinging to selfless. The clinging to self-sufficiently, substantially existent self may be caused by the deeper clinging to self, which is to say that the self clinging to a self which is that objectively existent, self-sufficient or self-existent self, and but then on this grosser clinging to self cannot go together with it cannot be simultaneous with the deeper clinging to self, or and then because in the 400 in the commentary to 400 verses by Master Chandrakirti, he says that the grosser self called clinging to self, such as self-sufficiently existent self and so forth, may arise from the deeper clinging to self, but they will not go together with the it. Whereas when you have other afflictive emotions such as deeper or subtler attachment or anger and so forth, then they not only are given rise to by the ignorance, this deeper ignorance, but they can also go together with ignorance, and therefore destruction of the rest of the negative emotions through the destruction of the ignorance means by overcoming this deeper ignorance, you can also overcome the attachment and so forth, which also when at the deeper level of these negative emotions, attachment also has a sense of having holding on to some objectively existent beauty and or anger, and have called clinging to some kind of objectively existent called enemy and so forth. And so because of that, by overcoming the deeper ignorance, then you can overcome the rest the other negative emotions. These negative emotions, which to go together with such subtle ignorance, cannot be overcome by meditation or cultivation of compassion or loving kindness either. As Master Dharmakirti says, they are not diametrically opposed to this self, as clinging to self. And so although with regard to the explanation or interpretation of understanding of selflessness, there is difference between Pramanavarti said in Pramanavartika and the Madhyamaka text may be different, but the understanding of selflessness may be different, interpretation may be different, but then the logic as to applying the understanding of selflessness as the antidote to the clinging to self of a person is same. And so how do we go about with the destruction of ignorance now? As Master Aryadeva says, by destroying ignorance, then you will be able to destroy the rest of the negative emotions. And so he goes on to say, seeing dependent origination will lead you to cease ignorance. And so he doesn't just say that, by understanding that you cannot find things when you do analysis into them and try to find their identity within the designated phenomena or anything like that, but he says by understanding dependently arising nature of things, you will be able to do away with this ignorance. And so what happens to us is, of course, when we look at things or when we think about ourselves or others and so forth, we always have this sense, or there is this appearance of these things and others and oneself having some kind of objective existence, some kind of independent existence. But then what we need to understand is that there is no such a self. There is no independently existent self, because everything is dependently arisen. Everything is dependently originated. And therefore, when you understand that things are dependent, you will be able to see that there's nothing independently existent, because the understanding of dependence, or in other words, the dependence and independence, are mutually exclusive. And therefore, if things were to have any independent existence, they cannot depend on others. And whereas things are dependent, therefore they cannot be independent. And therefore, Master Arya Deva goes on to say in the same verse, following the previous one, therefore, with all one's efforts, one should first teach or relate this very fact about thing about how things are dependently originated, and then and also it is possible for us to do away with, or this clinging to the objective existence and things, this ignorance, because since ignorance always holds on to something that is not real, that is not a fact. Therefore, when you understand that things are dependent, and then this can actually do away with that ignorance of holding on to some objective independent existence, because these kind of negative emotions or negative destructive perceptions or distorted perceptions can be overcome. They cannot stay forever, because there are, as Master Namakirti says, that it is not eternal, because the cause of it has an antidote. And so any effect or result that arises cannot arise when its cause itself is put to an end to. And therefore, similarly, attachment and other negative emotions, because they arise in dependence on the ignorance and ignorance about how things really are. In other words, clinging to some kind of independent, objective, true existence and things. Therefore, they whereas the ignorance says things have some objective existence, your understanding of dependent origination of things tells you that there is nothing independently existent, just as this ignorance holds on to or says. And therefore, you can see that these two are mutually exclusive. In other words, understanding that things do not have any objective existence actually ends this holding on to the things having some objective existence, just as hot and cold can nullify each other. Likewise, the understanding of dependent origination can end this clinging to true existence.
I think
and
first
things.
chapter,
And one has a valid support of valid
third,
cognition, the other does not have.
about the altruism and how to pledge, right? Pledge. That is the 3 chapters which I mentioned that. The 4th chapter and the 5th chapter, once you pledge, you say, now on, I dedicate my body, speech and mind to serve to infinite sentient beings. So once you determine that, once you develop or make some kind of pledge, then you need, 박유 류도 시신 류 박유 봤어. 가
care,
가. care.
care.
Like you see sick person, always, oh, I should not do this, I should not this, like that. So some kind of cautious or care. For that, that's the fourth chapter mentioned. Then fifth chapter, the watching some part of your mind, so sort of alert and watching whether you carry because of your way of life properly or not, some kind of constant watching. 시신세서 지수도는 거사.
Conscious.
Conscious. I think difficult to pronounce.
Conscientiousness.
Oh, that's the one. So, that's fifth chapter. Now, sixth chapter, patience. And then, eighth chapter, no, because of the seventh chapter, is how to meditate. Mare. Jundu. Effort. Effort. Tirelessly, effort. Then eighth chapter, actually the name of the chapter is meditation, but actually detailed explanation about, you see, how useful altruism and self-centered attitude, how harmful, that mentioned. The ninth chapter, the philosophical sort of explanation, quite difficult. So in order to get the proper understanding about ninth chapter, you need the study or awareness about Nagarjuna's text and Buddha Palita, Aryadeva, Buddha Palita, and Chandakirti. See, these four, Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Buddha Palita, Chandakirti, then Shandadeva, same sort of view, same concept. So in order to get proper understanding about ninth chapter, you need study about other books. So it is quite complicated. Then 10th chapter, dedication, like that. So now this two chapter, 6th chapter and 8th chapter, although this the one Buddhist sort of literature or Buddhist sort of text, but the meaning is common, or practice is common. All those major traditions which teach us the practice of love, practice of tolerance, practice of forgiveness, we can use, except it's some sort of the reasons may be something unique according to Buddhism. Otherwise, you see, the most of the sort of the explanation is common. So I thought maybe useful. So then, now these two chapters. Oh yes, 2 chapters now. Now,
उनके बाद
Translate earlier. Chimi. On chair. onche. So earlier His Holiness was mentioning that by understanding that these two perceptions, the perception of seeing things having no objective existence, independent existence, and seeing things having some independent existence are mutually diametrically opposed, and therefore one has valid support from valid cognition, and then other does not have. Therefore, you can actually see that with the one which has the support of valid cognition, you can end the other one without valid support of valid cognition and knowledge, because it's just a mental figment, and therefore and therefore you see that when you end this clinging to self existence and things completely, then it is possible for you to, I mean, the ignorance completely, then it's possible for you to actually get freedom, attain freedom. And therefore, when you see this possibility for yourself, that it's not just some kind of superficial knowledge, but that it is possible for oneself to be out of suffering, then you will also be able to see that others who are actually tossed in suffering through their own ignorance and attachment and so forth, can also, it's possible for them also to end their suffering by ending this ignorance. And therefore you think of called attaining first and liberation for yourself, and then you also think of leading others to liberation, and the ultimate highest form of nirvana, which is the bodhi enlightenment of the complete enlightenment of bodhi, enlightenment of Buddhahood. And then when you see this for yourself, then you will also be able to have this great compassion towards others who are tossed and suffering as well, by seeing the possibility for you to attain enlightenment. Then you will also see that same possibility for others, and then when you see them suffering because of their ignorance, you feel this compassion and towards them, that they're not just wishing them to be free from suffering, but that you will take the responsibility to help them. And therefore understanding of emptiness is very important to understand the possibility that one can attain as liberation and the ultimate enlightenment, the complete enlightenment of Buddhahood.
Now, gaba tong tu sawayi jinda dishi cholo so leje kanyi degu yo kondru jigi jobar chis. Ani shidan debi debu me shaso na maa sunya di. Ani gada ani shidangi nimi sebe penyu sungyo.
तो शांति पारमिता जो छठवां पारमिता,
The first sixth chapter, which says, whatever wholesome deeds, such as venerating the Buddhas in generosity, that have been amassed over 1,000 eons, will all be destroyed in one moment of anger, and there is no transgression like hatred and so forth. What these show is the shortcomings or the disadvantage or faults of hatred or anger, and the advantage or the positive qualities of tolerance or patience.
शांति का अभ्यास करना चाहिए। तो इस श्लोक में खासकर हमारा जो द्वेष है, द्वेष के विपरीत जो प्रेम है, वो किस प्रकार से इसका विरोधी है, वो फायदे वाले इसके बारे में बताया गया है।
So now you see transformation of our views or transformation of our emotion. You see, must come from voluntarily. Nobody can force. So, in order to develop volunteer sort of the enthusiasm, voluntarily enthusiasm to follow that, to practice that, you see, you need the because of pros and cons are there. Pros and cons. The harmfulness about anger, hatred, the benefits about patience, like that. So once we thinking seriously, then you get conviction. Oh, I must make effort. To increase the positives sort of thinking and reduce negative thinking. Here also you see you need, as I mentioned briefly, you have to know the system of emotion or mental thinking, and we must know the contradictions among the different sort of minds or emotions. So now here, that the kasoda dinda any new buddha shedan de bitgome sabat de godume the certain and the not so you comparchas that day shedan sumu semchana setrama any 공주쇼 이렇게 산이 윤도 공주에네 커도데 즉슨 뭐지고 서버성도 마세베 아니 어디 즉 공주 지르고 마여르도 대베이나 간다 저기 남주베 좁은 예부지 가본 예부지 그게 투베 커도올이야 가나 영향고에 심 공주 지르도 마여르시 대베 커도올라 가본 예부지 통배 있네 즉 수인댕에서로 막아서 지원되기도 하고. 자, 저는 인도산에 간다 시장 수능을 semchana yini shiwa nyammenyongs 가dan dewa mitolas 대신도 공주시부 세체 대베이나 니년에 니 먹고 세체 공주 지금 그게 미버더 넘버 미버더 로리아 샤체 아니 በት 뭐지 세체 아니 파로죠 소알로죠 세대야지 그 인구보다 서들이 인디 님이 원신스 때문이유스네 로베트 이 처부처부 차 맞다 차 되는지 근데 지금 그 유로 커뮤니티잖아요 다들 제르고 쓰기도 와 아니 공주 균배 무트는 내지 집에이나 르긴 종의 수 이문 시스템스라데 아니 그 매버쳐도 용도 조르스 되는 식도 와 사실은 인도산에 간다이네 다 첼레네 아래샤 태도 심머지와 서버정도 마세베 첼레네야 소수머지베 샤라 소수 김산나라레 머지버서대야 지소 나리네 다 머지버 용대야 저번에 관계 어느당 지켜주시
तो हमारे जो अच्छे विचार हैं वो
Number 2, it says there is no transgression like hatred and no fortitude like patience. Thus, I should strive in various ways to meditate on patience. And then the next verse says that my mind will not experience peace if it fosters painful thoughts of hatred. I shall find no joy or happiness. Unable to sleep, I shall feel unsettled. And so what this teaches is that when you are intensely angry at somebody, you become very unhappy. And because of that unhappiness, what happens is even if you, when you remain, when it persists, when this anger persists, what happens is even if you see someone whom you usually feel delighted or joy to see, like your friends and so forth, I mean, even seeing them, when you will find them annoying. And so annoyance develops because you are unhappy through anger. And then not only that, you also find restlessness. You remain restlessness because of this continued anger that even makes you lose your sleep. Even if you will lie on your bed, you will roll sideways here and there and not being able to sleep. And then some scientists even say that if you remain angry all the time, then that actually eats or your immune system as well, and therefore when that happens, what happens is your lifespan will also be harmed. And then because you are unhappy, because of your unhappiness, you also make others, like families or people in the community, also unhappy as well. And therefore these are the faults or shortcomings of anger or hatred.
तो ये सारी की सारी इन परेशानियों की जड़ हमारा क्रोध है। वैज्ञानिक लोग भी ऐसा मानते हैं कि क्रोध ज़्यादा होने से अगर हम लगातार क्रोध उत्पन्न करते रहेंगे, गुस्सा उत्पन्न करते रहेंगे, तो हमारी शरीर की जो शारीरिक क्षमता है, जो शरीर को चलाने वाले हमारे अंदर एक जो ऊर्जा होती है, वो भी नष्ट होती चली जाती है। धीरे हमारा पतन होने लगता है। फिर आगे कहा गया कि हृदय में द्वेष का कांटा रहते न मन में शांति मिलती है और न शारीरिक सुख मिलता है, न नींद आती है और न स्थिरता रहती है, तो हम किसी भी काम में स्थिर नहीं हो सकते हैं। फिर इसके बाद हम स्वयं दुखी होते हैं, परिवार को दुखी करते हैं, समाज को दुखी करते हैं, देश को दुखी करते हैं, और इत्यादि प्रकार की जो परेशानियां हैं अपने साथ साथ दूसरे लोगों को भी देखते रहते हैं।
Oh yeah. 다지네 컨시 딤도 촌좀바 디니 테니 디단 샨도 데스 다 콩루 다 콩루 이니 간다지 차의 윤도 차의 윤 랑의 셴 지금을 보게 믿어 용되겠지 저리 중국에 말이 다 대파 뇽단 콩루 똑똑 세배 냠니 제배이나 아니 ten dida shandu des chado inaya 능시 dala shara ine soso sengu nalo kongro maji bacheni sebe nyamling thane kongro ki motu bache debe ina 능시 dala shara ine miti semla shidi dede ajiki sengu nalo kongro shukshubu gebe ina 능시 nyandu shara ine gibaya mede bache ko sabado 사 김모집사 또 소소도 소소 셈 뒤모도 가려야 로데도
And so verse number 4 says, a master who has hatred is in danger of being killed. And even by those who, for their wealth and happiness, depend upon the master's kindness. And so when you remain angry, what happens is it will harm you in the short run as well as long term, and it harms yourself and others. You make them unhappy, yourself unhappy, and others unhappy as well. Contrary to that, if you were to actually apply the antidote to anger by practicing patience, then you will be able to have peace of mind. So peace of mind has to do with your own perception.
독사です세네 배 세단 제베 그돌이야 배 세단은 지 니미스 때 세단 파지 자야 가오래 그배로 슉 잡고시 뭔도 줄베 그도데 데는 없어 녀보전사래 가오도 다 가르쳐서나 그 세단데 랑게 줄도 깨는 되는 연구야 봐. 그래서 디네 뭐 인도산에 세단 지식이 때 줄을 뭔거 챘네 줄이야 녀보 때네 제베이나다 세단 ngonggo wada tabshi dire wada disungyoare dende yindu mendu chadan deba yi geshe parle chunggyurwa yimi dewe senyene shidan tede danjom sos yimi dewa semda sikda irritate cheshe das mojiur jondu da shidan yoyagi ko gyudi dichigore wada shidan gyu negola nyambutena lala yore 근데 시장의 주 숙성을 담아 주파 봐 가서 제로 못 주었잖니. 애니 시장 꼭좀 뒤쳐버려 있지.
So, verse number 7 says, having found its fuel of mental unhappiness in the prevention of what I wish for, and in doing what I do not want, hatred increases and then destroys me. Therefore, I should totally eradicate the fuel of this enemy, for this enemy has no other function than that of causing me harm. And so, what this shows is that anger or hatred can, I mean, once you are overcome with anger or hatred, I mean, even if you think that you come to your sense and think that, oh, it's so bad, I must put an end to it and so forth, it would be really difficult for you to counter it once it has overcome you. But then what you need to do is to counter the cause of anger or hatred, and which is this remaining the feeling of unhappiness, that actually is like the cause to anger or hatred.
कारण को अगर हम जान पाएंगे तो धीरे धीरे उन उन कारणों को, उन वजहों को अगर नष्ट करते जाएंगे तो हमारा द्वेष और क्रोध नष्ट होते चले जाएंगे.
Oh yeah. 나한테 고대 뒤송도와 개디주소요는 텔레미가 지시. 개디주소 매나니 텔레미가 채집해. 답변 리얼리스틱 식도와. 깽엔 조베 그돌이야. 야, 다 깽엔디. 아, 또 쥐어야 도면도. 쥐어야나什么就 저거 말이. 깽엔 쥐어야게 털었어. 쥐었으면은 아니什么就 저는 그렇게 판독하게야만. 나도 낭미를 자신이 야가로다.
इससे पहले मैं
So verse number 10 says, why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? And what is the use of being unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? So this verse is actually something, talking about something which, I mean, realistically. And what it tells us is that if you somehow encounter some misfortune, you have a misfortune, and then when you think that when you find that it can't be solved, that whatever has happened to you can be solved and overcome, then there's no need, why you should be unhappy and worried. But if it cannot be solved or overcome, in any way, then there's what is the point of being unhappy?
यदि प्रतिकार संभव हो तो दोर मनस्य न करके प्रतिकार के उपाय करना उचित होता है. यदि उसका प्रतिकार होना असंभव है तो फिर दोर मनस्य सा चिंता में पड़े रहने से कोई फायदा नहीं होता.
Ja. 다데 다음 다게 현남라. 현은 다당. 아니 소순 자시 졸라. 다 직진 최게 해야 돼. 때나 가 동는 미가 녀버 주는 가 녀버 뭐 주는 미가 때나 가 매는 미가 녀자 주는 가 지금 그게 명시해 주는 미가 다 디시 디게버디 직접 최게 해야 돼. 어떤 거는 이 믿어요. 다 디리 토네 조용 거야. 다 랑다 랑게 냥게 쳐라. 대화 주는 가 다 쉬우지게 대화를 지 가서 다들 상세 대화를 왔다. 다들 대화 채식 대화 지 그때 시작도 대보스게 말해. 포기 대화 생각이 안 내주 가가리샤. 다들 되게 상세 대화 원에서는 님부스게 매딩에. 다들 지금 쉬우지게 너든 터도를 쓰이체. 치성기 지금 이대매배 대화를 쉬우지게 개체부 지인도잖아요. 이 동조 미거 미도 윤도서는 남사 아니 이 미디 용되겠지 용되기도 와. 다가는 신기 지 녀버 주는 가와시다 숙성부여나 녀버 뭐 주는 미거 용돼야. 다가는 신기 때영아 정해 주는 시부지 가부지 제비이나 녀매 주는 시부지 배 맞아지야. 다가는 신기 녀라 주는 가 녀라 뭐 주는 아니 미거 다 디디 그 This, and that you do in Dichigores, Randa Ranka Chola, or that Tumbe Chadi the Chuna, Hajanga Pigata, Gavarcheta. Do you do any deed doctor della Mikawa? सूक्ष्म बुझाते हैं ठीक है ये में तो यूं किया है
अभिष्ट या अनिष्ट भाव की यह प्रक्रिया बहुत ही विचित्र होती है क्योंकि अपने लिए या अपने
And so, verse number 11 says, "For myself and for my friends, I want no suffering, no disrespect, no harsh words, and nothing unpleasant. But for my enemies, it is the opposite." And so, what this is relating to us is the 8 worldly concerns, where such as when yourself or your friends and relatives and so forth have happiness, you are happy, and whereas when the others when yourself and others, your friends and so forth, do not have suffering, you are unhappy, and so forth. And so, what happens here is, of course, we are here talking about some kind of a happiness which is called contaminated or impure, or that has come through, called karmic causality, and therefore it is like a samsaric kind of suffering and happiness. So, because you are attached to these 8 worldly concerns, then when they happen to you, or when the good things happen to you and your relatives and friends and so forth, you become happy, delight, and joyous, and so forth. Whereas if they happen to somebody whom you consider as your adversary or enemy and so forth, you are unhappy, and so forth. So because of this, then you also, when they have gains, when their enemies and so forth have gains, you are unhappy. Whereas when you and your friends and so forth have gain something, then you are happy. And also when they have fame, I mean, you are happy. When enemies have fame, you are unhappy, and so forth. So whatever you like, and in other words, those things that you consider to be favorable to you and your families and friends and so forth, and when they happen to you, you are very much excited about it, and you become too happy, joyous, and so forth, and emotionally, and get excited. Whereas when the opposite happens to you and your family and so forth, you become unhappy. So there's no need to be attached to these worldly concerns, in other words.
Any 가서는 대바도 맨데고 탁슉 차고야. 다디 다 슉충도 하지. 다디 안다 디두사디 폭네 배다 단도 내등에 대화지는 대하고 내주 가가다. 다 안다디 땅안도 차시겠다. 미지신한 게다 사제가 처와 대화. 다 된지 간 로디가 얼바. 그래서 그 대화 거래 간다. 즉 사제가 처와 대화세 다 사제가 처와 대화세 그 간다 디 줄을 지금 땜바 디 저기 양답에 대화지나 사제가 처와 대화디 영향이 줄을 지금 땜베 저기 대화 집에로 놓고 봐라 디미도가 나라도 지금다 가서 보면 또 담숨 지금 처음 시부시 쉬우지 너데도 그제 중에 지금 강야로 매딩에 너가 큰 스미야로 매대버치기 더도 남자로 제 대대하지 대시라하게 너가스게 매버치 독수 예배이나 별로지 때도록 해와도 어제는 인도산에 또 딘딘데비 처진에 멤버다 대화대에 대외균의 장가종 동행진의 신도만 진짜 인도산에 다 동해 야 타직도 배 미가에 로티 다 숙성당 거래 다 달라야 동해의 연대삼네 동해 매버는 인중매 대외 심규 때문에 신다지마 빼지는마 숨네 간다 그 간다 지금 동해 앞에 민대버로 슉 차고 쇼지르잖아 챔버질이네 미대어 용어야 이 미대어 용어야지 딱그 삼단에 그 동해를 따당하고 그냥 또 요치베이나 이 미대어 아니 숙충주레스 어때지 또는 되게는 삼들잖아요 엔디 배 롤리아 배 그 추야르스 민두스 그 동해를 연대도 때는 진짜 삼단데 아니 배 롤 추르 민두스도나 대 막고 배wan데스 겁나라면 이게 왜 뭐를 가야 요뭐이스 대회 내가 충고배 내가 전부 세버 차스 지금
So in What these verses show is that we should not be too attached and excited and too wanting of these temporary sort of happiness, joy, or blissful experiences, nor should be too disturbed by not be too averse to those which are which make us unhappy. And so here, of course, when we talk about happiness or unhappiness, we are not referring to the ultimate eternal happiness that we can attain by overcoming the afflictive emotions and so forth. But here, what we are dealing with is the temporary sort of happiness, of samsaric happiness, which come through the contaminated causes. And therefore, if of course those pleasant experiences that we have in samsara, for example, of this world alone, were to have any kind of eternal existence or their ultimate happiness or delight and so forth, then the more we enjoy them, the greater they should also increase. But that is not the case. The more we try to enjoy this kind of temporary happiness or enjoy the more suffering that they lead to. And so we should not get attached to it, because when you remain rather undisturbed by these suffering or the unpleasant experiences, then you will have peace of mind.
지기 동에 배 류지 나자 서로 지기 된데기 배 잠시비 동에로 충분히 있나요? 네? 다 시부지기 배 바꿔서 왔다. 미스부 슉 잡고 마셔보신다. 근데 사버지기. 전에 샘기 시들도 못 추고 그래서 애니 시다 제 동해 용다 저 자와다 녀목 체되게 하래 아니 아다 검들이잖아 셰당 스티 녀목래 자상가다 셰당이야 녀부때니 셰당라 타베 그돌라 아니 라라고 말이스 녀목 셰당 때부 녀목 남다 유인제베 겁라 유인지선은 너무 많스 그라 근데 인도 라라보다 야마리스 이내 딱고 에네 시단 녀모버 시단 더불어 배 에네 배 가서 그게 그 상황도 메도 코 잘았다니 달이야 에네 갑자기 그래서 된대기 녀모배 에네 더 시단 더불이야 어느 전에 달이야 디 상황도 메도 달아배 당연히 제가 있나 동해 탐제 캐서는 시장로서 전주버 대다 제시 보우데스 때문에 보우레스 다른 아주 자세야 돼 바로 깨베 이문에 잡아와 나 코레 교육이 차단의 녀몽고 관계 애들랑 연내받지 아주 충분해 근데 이번 인도산에 담시 샴레 요래 나 가다 천아 뒤규기 시장을 초거래 마도 차단으로 초거래 마도 미코라 차단의 상황도 써 닝제 사는 닝지 개고래. 다들 숨겨야 돼. 저 십제배 나리야. 투베 녀모 니스기 초양 중부 주고라 매버 주고 매버 따르스. 투베 녀모 니스기 녀모 당들 강사 민세수 여체고도가. 투베 심정기 이네 심정 모르고베 시부도 저기 그 녀모베 상황도 심버되겠다. 닝제 고니. 그게 견스스디 녀모들 시거르마도 녀모디베 너지베 터도들 시거르마도 녀모디 샹완도 제베 간사들 닝지 고마도 니 가서 그게 샤다 서버다 민드베 엔디 야완도로 요구마레스 배나 가사한다디 초양 중부 추고라서 배나 미치기다 배지 난 중부서를 다 가다 되게 배 녀버를 샤체 지시되는 지라 애니 멤버디 간라선네 타고르도에 싸워치그레스 디 지금 심2 되버디 지금 멤버 단 지파 세야 탑시 잡아마도 그 심2 되버디기 지금 넘주 향사 되버디기 콘도식 말바스 어빼지는 시 투베 께 녀몬디 께 시거마도 녀몬이 샤와도 께 간사들 께 시그마레스 다디 samdātuwa. 아주 그게 술은 장르에 내버지게 밑독슈시베이네 다 닝제 다디 영업의 상황도 상샤 랑도가 내라 몽샤 삼니 니기야도 와. 어떤 게 타네 얘는 동력이 미고 샤서 주제 쉬우지 판다야래. 그도 그 ngöy 내주리아 강에서야 더 팽기연에 배약 그 여말에 소소 셈그 시디 뭐주야라 쉬우지 판다도 와. 동력이 미고 샤윤데. ngaji 모시부시기 어쩌니 그버베 소능소로 팔용체 이 소능 팔에 그돌이야 동네 미고 시기여서 시다 팽기사디 근데다
अगर किसी अमंगल अर्थात बुरे कर्म की वजह से हमें कोई दुख प्राप्त होता है तो उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा विचलित होने की आवश्यकता नहीं है अपने आप
So, in order to practice patience, of course, you might say that to overcome suffering and so forth, these is not easy. How can I do it? The practices, of course, you need to familiarize with these practices, as it says. There's nothing in verse number 14. It says there's nothing whatsoever that is not made easier through acquaintance. So, through becoming acquainted with small harms, I should learn to patiently accept great harms.
तो हम सब जानते हैं कि दुख का प्रमुख कारण अज्ञानता है हमारी अज्ञानता की वजह से ही दुख उत्पन्न
So, of course, to overcome our negative emotions is not easy for us, but we need to familiarize with the processes of overcoming it. And therefore, through one's efforts, then one can actually create or bring peace of mind within oneself. And then the text goes on to say in verse number 20.
दुख से अपने चित्त
No,
दूषित नहीं होने देते क्योंकि हम क्लेश निराकरण के युद्ध के मैदान में
even when the wise are suffering, their minds remain very lucid and undefiled. For when war is being waged against the disturbing conceptions, much harm is caused at the time of battle. And so, and then it goes on to say the victorious warriors are those who, having disregarded all suffering, vanquish the foes of hatred and so forth. Common warriors slay only corpses. And furthermore, suffering has good qualities and so forth. And so, what we have to see is that although we may face some difficulties in overcoming the negative emotions, but we should still persist in our efforts so that there comes a point where we are not disturbed by them. And what we need to overcome is not just the so-called enemies and so forth, but our own negative emotions. And therefore, the Buddha has said that we should not be disturbed by these called temporary sort of disturbances caused by so-called enemies. In fact, we need to feel compassion towards them by showing patience, and because they are overcome by their own negative emotions, and therefore they harm you. They harm us. And therefore, instead of being angry with the person, you should feel compassionate, whereas the anger and the negative emotions that they have should be countered. And just as it is said in a text, that the Buddhas do not see the beings who are overcome with afflictive emotions to be overcome, but what they see is that these negative emotions are the ones that need to be overcome. And then, as it is also said in this text later on, when a physician actually tries to treat someone who is overcome with some kind of a possession through the possession of some spirit or something, of course, the behavior that comes out of this person who is disturbed mentally, is not the doctor does not feel angry or anything, but feel compassion for the person and not his behavior. And so, similarly, we need to see the anger as having being something that causes harm to us.
잠시 도수는 그 도스마다요. 지님으로 충분도돼 용도 같아. 그래서 어제 이르잖아요. 샹양 동네 연대니 저 책과 싸웠지. 애니 코아발라 닝지께스. 안덕금디 고매하게 닝지사디 밀어 통주를 제백해서 말다. 나도 몽구지기 닝지스들잖아. 닝지스는 소소 있을 때 타르지. 샹데만 말지. 그래서 안덕금들은 아주 정주심 계약이 정주심 정액이 닝지사디 샹 초도 되네. 근데 대 동의 주도 잡아도 최상별 로직 레야지. 사진데 인도 로종 랑다 지게나라 강도 수던 적외체等于끌레 만다싱스 샹의 사바타고의 초도 잡은 좀보쇼 손대 어디 샹의 야베 원하는 통중 캐스게 타네 닝제사디 멤버 샹 초도 꿀 란텔레 멤버때 다 텔레야 지 소스베 류가 이순부터네 페바 컨데스 줘야도가 차도 페바 컨데스 줘야도가 풀을 청주고 살아 컨데스 거야 그다 지금 탑시로 도와서다 뒤sam다 아주 고거로 서들이 이르잖아요. 지금 소수를 동네 지금 다 소수한테 커도 되는 지기. 답변은 안돼. 강도 소동 접에서等于 끌래 멤버 따스에 뒤에 지다 아니 튼두지다 도르이나. 그럼 무슨 일도 도르이나. 런이 밀을 터야래. 아니 진짜 이르잖아요. 무슨 일을 멤버 따토고 말봐. 따이네. 무슨데 치료 남지기 싫어요 말해. 근데 이르잖아요. 영원배 샹왕도 녀모배 찬열이야. 딱고 카야 말이야. 신경 말. 딱 안서 녀모는 님이 고 녀모는 님이 통계통계는 녀모배 샹왕인데 튼두들에 멤버스도가. 튼두들 믿어서 라마구조를 찾아와. 안서 고대부천 더도 녀모배 샹왕도 되기도. 저 대응원에 샤바이나 무슨 일이랑 멤버도가. 봐. 사진인데 다 상당적으로 도스는人동의 나대보다 용배 상황되어 되지 상당히 근데 용모 다른 식으로 통일되잖아요. 든두지를 매배서도가 어다 dinner이 팽그리스 교회 최고 서지 코어벌 니지기 아니 용배 아니 저부 동의 용기가 있는잖아요. 아니 디글즈지 결라가 사디 송샤
So sometimes we can, verse number 21, furthermore, suffering has good qualities and so forth. What this shows is sometimes there are people who are arrogant and even slight, even if they are able to do something good slightly, they become very proud of it. And when they really are not able to do something, they get displeased and kind of become lowly in their mind. And so I mean, these should not happen to us. And when they face with some problems, I mean, they are overcome with that, I mean, kind of an pride and so what we need to, what this shows is that we should actually have compassion towards others. Compassion here doesn't mean that you should have pity on others, because when you have a sense of pity to others, what happens is you consider yourself to be higher or than the other person. You look down upon the others as lower, and therefore, I mean, compassion has nothing to do with that. But here, when we practice compassion, cultivate compassion, it has also to do with the practice of bodhicitta, where as a practitioner of bodhicitta and compassion, what you should see is that others are higher than yourself, as we find mentioned in the 8 verses of mind training, where it says, Geshe Langpa Thangpa says that whenever I associate with others, may I consider myself as the lowest and look upon others as higher than me. And so, with this kind of attitude, then one should think of actually create positive actions in others. I mean, bring virtues to others in their body, speech, and mind, and also think of bringing happiness, long-term happiness, as well as short-term ones, and ultimate long-term happiness, and also enlightenment to others. And so, one should always think of how one would be able to lead them to a virtuous way of life and also the long-term happiness and enlightenment and so forth. And so when we think in such a way, then when we compare ourselves to other animals who may be doing some harm to others sometimes, but then, I mean, these animals and insects, of course, do not really know the workings of karma, and therefore they may be doing something what they biologically equipped with, and they're more honest than us. But we knowingly indulge in negative actions, and therefore, if we look from this point of view, we can see that we are inferior to animals because of this. And therefore, the text also says, through being disheartened with it, arrogance dispelled, compassion arises for those in cyclic existence, negativity is shunned, and joy is found in virtue.
소소 미것에 자야 지금 동해다 다 소용하러 미디어 소용하러 되는 용도잖아요. 단데 깨나서 그 턴에 주버려마도 깨지기 말이지. 와. 다 깨인데 나라 지금 소수 자주 무서워지. 이나 배지 태야다. 저 지대 이번 인도잖아요. 단데 천리부터 게 서도와 지 세단계의 그돌이야 그게 꼭 간다 디시 independent target 국도와 말아도 상단에 커선들 이야기 99% 남도고 줬다고 여러분 남도고 줬다야기 유디 지 independence 로를 샤이무도 땅 뭐도잖아 그게 망부 왕게 딱 지 소소리야 그냥 바로보다 자디에 더마 거래 줄이야 지기 깨나서 볼라 때네 이 믿어지 총 달라 때네 애니 셰단기 달라 때네 애니 라려야 배넘주 된대야 아니 지금 믿어서 돼야 용기 알아봤다 그래서 깨 두멀에 중벌에 삼 자유산에 independent target이 또 소주도 아주 지리 쟤는 어디 다르셔
श्लोक नंबर 33
Verse number 33 says, so when an improper action, by thinking that such things arise from conditions, I shall remain in a happy frame of mind.
हमारे दुख हैं वो कारणों की वजह से आते हैं उनका कोई वजह होता
or and we should see that there are many different factors that actually have role in bringing about this unhappiness. And when we see somebody causing us unhappiness, for example, and even ourselves, oneself has a role in it. And therefore, when you see that when something happens, it has come about through many different causes and conditions, then you will not be, you will not experience disturbance of mind and unhappiness. And as I already mentioned yesterday, that when you a scientist, a psychiatrist has said that when you become angry at others, of course, anger projects some absolute enemy or someone who has really disturbed you absolutely. But then that negativeness in the person is 90% of it is said to be our own mental projection. And so similarly, when you look at the adversary who is causing you unhappiness, who is causing you disturbance, you can see that that person himself or herself in the beginning must have been disturbed by something, and because of that became unhappy, and then this anger or some kind of a dissent develops in the person, and then that is in turn exhibited or expressed outwardly, and then you are disturbed. And so you can see many different factors playing role in the person causing harm to you as well, and then you will be able to actually curb your anger towards the other.
다 지금 현지랑라 지금 지금 랑라 벽에 녀바 모종 왔다 지금 다가는 지금 벽에 녀묘차서로 지도주체디 류릉어선에 하면 도가 저도 섬을 믿어 연구하러 와 저들이 인도전에 이니 류제마이 왜 수장 강도 안 섬민이 류릉어버 셔면은 류니 동에 다가 너스 다진데 인도 제 녀바 모종 왔다 현지 벽에 랑라 야베 측수마 왔다 지금 아니 지금 미녀버 잡아 나와진데 되게 이게 이제 최제나 다 한번 있으세요 다 뒤에 룰은 뭐 민주나 심지 지지럽도 초스
श्लोक
52 and 53, verses 52 and 53 says that since my mind is not physical, in no way you can, in no way can anyone destroy it, because this mind is not physical. Therefore, even if some these enemies may try to put you down or despise you, disparage you, and so forth, your mind cannot be harmed at all, because it's not physical. But through its being greatly attached to my body, it is caused harm by physical suffering. And therefore, it says, since disrespect, harsh speech, and unpleasant words do not cause any harm to my body, why, mind, do you become so angry?
धर्मों की वजह से हम जब शरीर पर कुछ हानि नहीं होती, इन ये जो चीज़ें तिरस्कार या कीर्ति है, इनसे हमारे शरीर पर तो कोई नुकसान नहीं होता, बल्कि हमारे चित्त पर, हमारे मन पर इसका प्रभाव पड़ता है. तो ऐसे शब्द सुनकर हमें क्रोधित नहीं.
53 shows the rest of the remaining 8 worldly concerns as well.
अगर हम क्रोधित होंगे तो हमारे चित्त में नुकसान होगा, ना कि शरीर पर.
뭐야 다 저놈아 다 수고야 다 수모치 다 저놈아 전에 디샴데 솔로가 다 딘다 솔로가 다지 솔로가 자탐바지
100.
श्लोक नंबर 100.
So we're skipping the rest of the verses. Turn to verse number 100. I, who am striving for freedom, do not need to be bound.
칭미그 강다 다 징죄세와 들었다는 지서죠. 다는 동네 중도나 산지진의 진업신 미동 고벌은 이겨버 들었다는 지서죠. 저는 다 간다 소설이야 지금 믿어서야 돼. 이게 땅원에 전에 지금 더 세배냠는 제야 지금 아재 중으로야 지금 동의진 나와 심전을 더 세상의 상황도 교배 심전을 야 인식이야 뒤리 연구를 했어. 대래야 아니 대응어도 랑의 판용구요레스 딘 레디 대래야 아니 딘이 선은 객지 대라 총 릭미티스 수승 그도 예면은 대라다는 미네섬스 다들마다 다님부터 들으셔 컨시컨스 다다 전에 간다연이 나란도 상주 쓰면 냠는 증액이 다 닝지 조래 닝지 냠는기 그게 간다데 셔당 초아들에 초로 무엇을 그게 돈의 증액이 쇠버리 진짜 인도 상주 쓰면 냠는 증액이 쇠배 냠는 내봐도 고요하래 쇠배 냠는 영화라 쇠버 책 고야기 겐 직자 차나마도 아니 배랑 아주 배는 나머지 거는 시하나 또 두병 올르면 써봤고야 민도가 다 이슈 쳐버지기 근조를 민도 써봤고야 민도가 지금 다가는 시기 가지 쳐버지기 엘라를 미는 서버 거야 민도가 서버 거는 서버 공고요 아래 간다 닝질로 콘에 콘도 배야 닝질로 냐바베버지 용야래야 서버 고요 아래 그래서 서버 고고요 있는 산에 서베 냠는 지하고 고급디 자유 수고요 그래서 dinner 있는 산에 자오디 뭐나 전에다 서베 냠는 그 고급 정액이 답에데 계신이 사고된 거래 지송했다.
Verse number 100 through to 102 and so forth. So what these show what verse number 100 says is, I who am striving for freedom do not need any to be bound by material gain and honor. So why should I be angry with those who free me from this bondage? Those who wish to cause me suffering are like Buddhas bestowing waves of blessings as they open the door for mine, not going to an unfortunate realm. Why should I be angry with them? So what this shows is that those who cause you harm actually give you the opportunity to practice patience and compassion. And actually, in verse number 102, it says, But what if someone should obstruct my gaining merit? And so actually, you should think in terms of the person who is trying to harm you as helping you in practicing patience. I mean, in essence, what is said here is, what these verses say is that for a practitioner of bodhicitta, what you must develop is compassion, as explained earlier, and the force that actually counters or obstructs that practice is hatred or anger, and therefore to counter that hatred, what we need is patience. And therefore, for Buddhists, for example, you cannot have practice patience in relation to Buddha, and for Christians, you cannot practice patience in relation to God, or for Muslims, you cannot practice this in relation to Allah, and so forth. But with whom you can actually practice patience is to those who actually cause harm to you, and therefore, in order to cultivate compassion, you need to have patience. And this patience comes in relation to someone who harms you, your enemy, your adversary, and therefore they must be seen as your spiritual teacher to teaching you the practice of patience.
왜 다게 달라 가르쳐선 다 달이야 시장의 상황도 손에 라는 내가 정해 그 다달이야 아니 미거 용 파초야 첩라 대돈 될라네 가고 그래 진짜 인도산에 랑그 서버권배 팬윤디 다들로 먹고 그래 어느네 다제 랑라야 아니 지 팬 동도가 로케 민도가스 제 사미운드 아니 랑의 팬바지 중나 디 팬 동도로 예미 차요 말이스 배낭가란즈 배낭맨 리아 따딩에맨 인생 베스타가 배 다고 되지 40부 찍으러 맨 코라 랑의 팬심게 개민도가 저 랑의 팬도 여배 인도선에 콜을 제부치기 하라 제대치기 하라 인지미지 팬심게 고구면도가 다른 데 쇼그데 이네 다데 이네 지 팬심 매버서도 마세베 내심이 알바스라나 딜랜데 내심이 예사 자오샤브레스 참아 다르스고 말았다고 딱하다 내심이 영역이 뇽문베 셰단게 샤와노 손댕게 내심이 여댕게 밑들라 다 미스네다 미스 조르데 밀 세베는 다 디 자오샤 차바레 딘데 인데 내심 예배 인상 자오레 텔레밍네 시랑지가레 딘데 인데 다 디당 뭐냐 전에 서버 거면 딱 그거배 약수들이 딱 되니 자치버리 스타지 숨고와 대디슈데 대럽도 당선났다. 야도 죽지. 대럽도 당선라. 때내 서버 깨면은 디니 서버 유연배 담배 최신 최버로. 다 자성부터 그래 잘다.
So when we meet with some adversary or enemy, and the text says that we should be happy with them, and then whatever merit or whatever positive called energies that you may create or gain, you should also dedicate them to your enemies and so forth. And in verse number 110, it says, but surely my enemies are not to be venerated, for they intend to cause me harm. Then how could patience be practiced if, like doctors, people always strove to do me good? And so, you may say that these enemies do not have any wish to help me, but then it doesn't matter. The text says that it doesn't really matter whether they really have the intention to help you or not. They do, by harming you, they do help you to practice patience. Just as when you take medicine, the medicine itself does not have any wish to help you or to cure your disease and so forth, but because it helps you, you take it and as prescribed by doctors. And so there's no need for the other person to help you as such, but because they really help you to practice patience, you should venerate them. And because they actually are harming you, because they're trying to harm you, and therefore you consider them to be your enemy as well. And so when you meet with such adversaries, what you should do is that you should take this as an opportunity for you to practice patience. So it says in 111, thus since patient acceptance is produced in dependence upon one with a very hateful mind, that person should be worthy of veneration, just like the sacred Dharma, because they are a cause of patience.
सधर्म के समान पूजा करनी चाहिए, तो शत्रुओं को एक अच्छे धर्म के समान मानना चाहिए, पूज्य हैं ऐसा मानने चाहिए, क्योंकि वो हमें धैर्य का अभ्यास कराने के लिए लाभकारी हैं.
ओए ताने दींदा श्लोक जातो सुसुम.
अब श्लोक नंबर 133
ना समझन गुले जुई माओ सांगे रुपताशो छंदी नील पेजेंदा 차다 진규 지미통 지마통 다 서버 건배니 레불이야 코르세 세베 제소다 남에 받아 자바이 신도 유진 소하다 콜르교회 되게 톱 세네 와다 세베냐면 제베이나 터도베 산제집에 참배들은 누야 차도 지금 그게 응원들려진 톱에 거둘래에 지금 숭세버로 써와 어떤 영야 아니 년자요야 미mon고 trouble 차야 어디 야래 어디 손다 살체.
So verse number 33 and 34, the two last verses should say that why do I not see that my future attainment of Buddhahood as well as glory, renown, happiness in this very life all come from pleasing sentient beings? While and then it goes on to give the benefits of practicing patience by saying, while in cyclic existence, patience causes beauty, health, and renown. And because of these, I shall live for a very long time and win the extensive pleasure of Universal Chakra King. And so what this shows, in basically these two verses tell us, is that through the practice of patience, you'll be able to gain or attain the major and minor marks of an enlightened being, Buddha and so forth, as well as to have good body, beautiful body, and so forth. Even in samsara, you will have also fame, popularity, as well as lots of friends and so forth.
Yeah. Now I would like to take few questions.
तो
I
अभी
think 3-4 questions.
अभी 3 या 4 प्रश्न होंगे, तो आप लोग 3 या 4 प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं.
Come. Here. Come here. Yes.
Hello. Your Holiness, first of all, I would like to really, really thank you for being that one voice in the world which is saving us all. That voice of peace, of compassion, which is very, very rare. I thank you for being here.
Okay.
Thank you for
Okay.
being in my life.
No questions.
Yes. So, Your Holiness, you have taught one meditation on compassion where one visualizes people who are suffering, we visualize people who are in poverty, and we visualize people who may be in pain or the victim of police brutality. So we visualize them, and then we visualize ourselves feeling compassion for them. And,
Okay.
And so
Okay. I think that point, I think tomorrow, the 8th chapter mentioned that.
Yeah. So question I had, Your Holiness, is whether by thousands of Tibetans and so many friends of Tibet visualizing such thoughts, are we creating the continued occupation of Tibet? And whether instead, if we visualize a free and beautiful and powerful Tibet, maybe we can have that breakthrough that we all are hoping for.
Actually,
Yeah.
according to Buddhist practice, the suffering, not suffering of suffering, but suffering of change. And then most important is kasa, conditional suffering. That is to say, our mind, you see, dominated by destructive emotion. So thinking that way, you see, develop sense of concern, not just a suffering feeling.
Right.
So then entire sort of the sentient being who are under dominant of ignorance or the clash. So that's the way. So then you see deeper. Otherwise, you see those people who enjoy material sort of the values. Then sometimes we not only develop sort of the compassion, but also you see develop jealousy. So we do not know the deeper level of suffering like that. So this is mainly you see deal the 8th chapter. Thank you. Now next question.
A very little question to Your Holiness. You have mentioned that there are 10 chapters in Bodhicharya.
Yes.
So which book we have obtained? There are only 9 chapters. So we have and
Only
a supplementary there.
chapter. Actually, it's 10 chapters.
There are 9 chapters in this book. So
Timare.
you
There's
have
only,
mentioned that
only 2 chapters.
Dedication. 10 chapters name is dedication. So we don't find in this book. So
No. This is actually 2 chapters, only 2 chapters. 6th chapter, 8th chapter.
No, in Hindi language there are 9 chapters, 1 to 9, and 10 remain.
Sasan Yorwe. That I don't know.
Yes.
You should ask publisher.
Yes.
Don't ask me.
I wanted to confirm it.
Okay.
Why one chapter is missing?
Actually, you see, these 2 chapters, as I mentioned earlier, you see, it's something common for all different major traditions which sort of teach us the practice of love, compassion, forgiveness. So these sort of they, I mean, these teachings see, can be fit those theistic religious sort of practitioner or non-theistic religious practitioner. Now, in these, you see, 2 chapters, nothing, not much sort of talking about Atma or Anatma or creator or not creator. So this is something common. Therefore, I suggested to them, you see, these 2 chapters. And then, you see, once you see this, you see, printed. So each person can have you see, that text. So the real change, not through one session. Real change, weeks, years. So therefore, you see, this text, keep yourself, and when your mood is quite good, then read, think. When your mood not good, then leave it. Yes, now next question.
पुनीत पावन जी से मेरा कहना है, क्या वैदिक धर्म सही था या बुद्ध की शील, प्रार्थना, समाधि?
Yes.
वैदिक धर्म ठीक था या वैदिक क्या था, हिंदू धर्म?
Ka. Re.
He's asking whether the Vedic teachings are
Jim
true
Shannon.
or the
Milk
practice
Pando,
of the 3 trainings of Shila, Prajna and Samadhi that the Buddha taught are true. So of course, if the teachings really benefit humanity, then that's good.
Also the compassion, all these things. And then ancient Indian sort of tradition also, you see, teach us samadhi and vipassana. So wonderful. 1,000 years it worked. Today also, you see, many people, I think millions of people get immense benefit. So very good. Then philosophical field, yes, there is a lot of sort of also the different views. Even within Buddhist, see, at least there's 4 major school of thought. Within Madhyamaka, there are 2-3 different views. So a lot of argument. That's philosophical views. So Veda also, you see, in philosophical field, I think there are, I think, different views. Okay.
पुष्य शुंग ने बुद्धों के भिक्षुओं की कत्लेआम क्यों किया?
क्या करना ठापा मांगो से रे खड़ी से ग्यावर नौला गोमा
का
ग्यागर नौला गेलों मांगो से रेस खड़ी से न से रेस
you know better.
ये तो आपको भी पता होगा.
So the question,
결혼 세배 그도는 가서 별도 스타디아야.
जब भारत में
generation.
so when the bhikshus were being massacred in India, Tibetans were just living in their own country.
Political reason, and also you see some fanatics or religious viewpoint also you see sometimes causing. So the problem is concept of one truth, one religion. Sometimes it causing problem. So in terms of individual level, yes, concept of one truth, one religion is very relevant. In terms of community, in terms of society, particularly like modern society, Indian society, the concept of one truth, one religion is unrealistic, not fit. So several truth, several religion is the realistic sort of view like that. So in ancient time, you see sometimes, yes, I think the destructions. Now, even today, look, in Africa, Christian and Islam problem. Some Muslim country, the Sunni, Shia problem. And like Northern Ireland, Catholic, Protestant problem. And now recently in Burma, a problem, Buddhist Muslim problem. and Sri Lanka, sometime back, Hindu and Buddhist problem. So these, due to lack of contact, lack of understanding about the same sort of value, same potential, same teaching, like that. Okay. Now next question.
I agreed with you on the first day when you talked of violence versus violence. Over 50% of the world's population is Muslims and Christians. The Muslims want to make more Muslims and convert their generation increasing. So does the Christians. I hear you saying, to me at least, to be compassionate and all that. But how practical do you feel is this philosophy of compassion? Because these people on this side and these people on this side are in their own world. And they are fighting, like Bush is also going into Iraq, like you said. And Palestine is fighting with Israel. And all this I see happening. So I'm wondering how this is all going to end and how do we begin, what I'm trying to say is look inside of myself. And I'm confused as to how these two groups, which are over 50% of the world's population, and they have all the guns and the warships, etc., are going to continue. I don't see any hope, basically.
Yes. I always is telling, according to my sort of conviction, right? Or realistically speaking, this problem will remain at least another, I think, 30, 40 years. Now, if we make effort now, firstly, closer relation within different religious tradition, or leaders level and ordinary level. Now, September, we will organize one sort of meeting with religious leaders on national level within India, in Delhi. I think about 100 leaders or representatives, we gathered. We will be gathered, and some discussions. So India, religious harmony, 1,000 years already there. Now we must make further effort. So I think the rest of the world, I think, can learn from India's tradition. And then fundamentally, the secular education, the importance of warm-heartedness on the basis of oneness of humanity. I feel that's the only hope. Then different faith, different races, different country, secondary. Religion, different religion, must serve humanity, not the orthodox way, realistic way. Muslim, cannot convert whole world. A Buddhist cannot convert 7 billion human beings become Buddhist, as well as Christian. Although Christian quite active, but still, impossible. To convert entire 7 billion human beings, difficult. So, as a Buddhist, Buddha's own time, so he never tried to convert all Indian to be Buddhist. And Jesus Christ, I think, never attempt entire world should be Christian, and Muhammad as well. So whether we like it or not, it is reality. We have to live together. Killing each other, no use, more suffering. So respect each other admire each other, if possible, learning each other, then real sort of harmony on the basis of mutual respect come. That we need. And provided through education, the secular ethics, educate people, then the whole thinking will change. So after 40, 50 years, I think different world can be possible if we really make attempt. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, on the first day you mentioned that there was a curriculum you had which has been prepared for teaching values. I want to know if that is something that's open for us to be able to use, and if so, how can I help in being able to give some of those messages to children?
Khasa. So actually we are working cooperation with some scientists, some educationists, start from America. Now some in Europe also now some involvement, and now in Delhi also you see some work now already we started. So perhaps I think maybe end of this year or next year I want to have some kind of international, firstly within the country with help of those scientists I know since 30 years. And these number of scientists also you see carry so as an experiment in their own area teaching the moral ethics. So they found only sort of the 3 weeks sort of training and short period meditation. Mainly you see they explaining the value of love, compassion. Then each day about 30 minutes, some kind of serious thinking. So the selected people, or including some student, before they start, you see this session, they examine blood pressure and amount of stress. Then after 3 weeks training, again check blood pressure reduce, stress reduce. As a result, person become much happier. So we are not talking about next life, or not talking karma or karma. Actually, this is the action. So some kind of karma meant for happy life, not heaven or hell. Simply, you see, try to build healthy body, happy person, then automatically happy family, happy community. So I don't know, you see, some kind of convene in Delhi. So once we finalize date, and then I think some because internet sakasa didn't share internet survey, internet.
Site.
Oh, so it's some people who have interest, then also you say come, join, talk.
Is it going to be something which we can use with children?
That's right. That's right. You see, our the effort make sort of curriculum from kindergarten up to university level, like that. So, I think within 1 year, I think it may be available. Then further discussion through experiment, and some school uses these sort of new curriculum. And then we'll see what the result after 4 years, 5 years, and then something convincing, some beneficial. Then from Kasoda. I mean, firstly, one school or one class or one school, I think, use as a pilot experiment. Then concrete result there, then 10 schools, 100 schools, then eventually national level. I think we have to approach Indian government in Delhi.
Yes.
And also parliament.
Thank you.
And then finally, I think UN. Possible. Worldwide sort of movement. Isn't it? Right. Without sort of based on religious concept. Only based on scientific finding. Otherwise, you see, today, out of 7 billion, as I mentioned the other day, out of 7 billion, 1 billion non-believer. So we must include these non-believer. Even anti-religion, atheist, we must include human brothers, sisters. Little bit sort of also the naughty human being against religion, still human being. We must sort of embarrass, right? Oh, embarrass, like that. So now I think last question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my greetings, His Holiness.
Yes.
Yeah, being a Hindu, we have this philosophy that everything that happens to us happens for a good reason. My question is about pain and suffering, and I also believe that pain and suffering happens to us for a good reason. And in your lectures today, you mentioned that we are not independent. Yeah, we are always dependent. So, how does the universe know what pain and suffering to give us, and how does it know what is the good that is going to come out of it?
Karsa, 대화도 동해. Yes.
Hindu ki chulu nanglola. Hindu chulu nanglola. Dunghe da ene medewa yunghe di goba jiyore, di yumsen jiyore, tanda jiyore segi yores. Tiji duy ngatun jikden nangla da kangen rao da dunghe damida yungdu. Ene di dukja rang da pendo mewa yinba khande sago tu ures. Di yumsen jikden di yugires, pendo yugires.
Of course, once you see some problems or some pains, some suffering already happen, then the Dungayang to levels.
Voluntarily accepting suffering.
Oh,
Yeah.
so that all major tradition, I think, sort of a similar practice, used in different sort of the philosophical views. Buddhists also, they say, Kasa, kienge changju lam to jurs.
Voluntarily accepting suffering and transforming the misfortune into a state of virtuous practice.
Oh, so that does not mean we welcome suffering. It is silly.
Is it?
If there is a way to overcome suffering, it is better to overcome suffering. And otherwise, you see, no use concept of moksha. If our life, samsara, really happy, then no need the concept of moksha.
Yeah, but if you believe that there is a positive that is going to come out of the suffering, so
Kasa.
wouldn't you welcome it?
Kaji dunghe dine ta yaga ji yungru yoba.
Ka.
Dunghe le dine yago yunghe yoba chikta khelin thukurwas.
Tirva.
Absolutely.
Just you see this chapter, you see mentioned in order to practice patience or forgiveness. You see, it mentioned that. But that does not mean, you see, we welcome suffering. No. It is our right to overcome suffering. I think basically we are sort of same like dogs or cats or birds who have the experience. Do not want suffering. It's by nature. So we human beings, deeper level of the causes of suffering, thinking, investigate. Through that way, overcome suffering. So it is really worthwhile. Whether achieve or not, different matter.
Sir, प्रणाम।
No, last question now.
या बस मैं आपको इतना कहना चाहूँगी कि आज आपने बहुत बहुमूल्य चीज़ें बताई हैं। मैं सिर्फ आपसे इतना पूछना चाहती हूँ कि मेरा कुछ ग्रुप है लेडीज़ का जिनको मैं बेसिक बताना चाहती हूँ आज जो आपने बताया है, तो क्या इसके उपलक्ष्य में कोई हमें छोटे बुक्स या कुछ साहित्य मिल सकता है?
가사.
드링 군딩 갈로나라 지다 차상와 야고 휴지 총송스. 다이나 프랑스 양 촉바 비미 촉바 된데 유스. 그래서 차진 펜도에 된다 지 대중중 된데 다 딜로나 야고 여러세 된데 지
What short form में जिसको हम
And what kind of books would you recommend for her to use for her group?
그래서 촉바서
So
냠도
that
초
they
아니
could
대해잡네.
also develop and make progress.
Many books. As far as my own sort of book,
कोई
I think two books.
या
The kinship of all.
Kinship of faiths.
So I mentioned all major religious tradition
या
carry same practice, that is love, forgiveness, these things. That's for promotion of religious harmony. Another book called so-called
Beyond religion.
Beyond Religion. Actually, that a title, not my recommendation. The publisher published that way. So I little bit sort of, I little bit sort of hesitant. The religion, I mean, the certain things which beyond religion may get impression. The point which I mentioned in that book is something above religion. That's totally wrong. Actually, the ethics, secular ethics, which I mentioned, is basis of all religions. So beyond means religion, no matter why one wonderful religion, there is limitation. A limitation means, you see, it cannot go universal. Only, you see, their own believer. So this secular ethics is no boundary. Entire 7 billion human beings. So the meaning is like that. So that book mainly, you see, telling or explaining secular ethics.
और मैं आपको एक